Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of A Coffee with Chris, the social media show that helps you create impact. As always, brought to you in association with our charity partners, 𝗖𝗄𝗄, who help local people affected by cancer. And new for 2025, Blue Bear Coffee, replacing your business's coffee to help children that have experienced human trafficking. Today, I'm sipping on the Colombia La Primavera. I need to improve my pronunciation of that. It is absolutely delicious, so make sure you get a batch. And also, this show is sponsored by Oliver Hill of Hill Coaching Company, Limitless Film and Media, Mindset HR, and Wingfield Consultants. That's the ramble out the way. Let's welcome today's guest. I'm so excited to be speaking with Sara MacGregor, employer brand and communications expert, managing director of 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗄𝗲, an award-winning employer brand and communications partner. She's also co-host of another podcast, Leap Listens, the employer branding podcast. 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗲, for those of you that don't know those guys, specialize in employer brand and B2B marketing. They collaborate seamlessly to craft creative stories that drive your business goals and reach the right audience. Sara, let's kick off with the what and the why of employer brand. What exactly is employer brand and why should business leaders care about it?
Great question. So firstly, thank you for having me on this show. So employer brand. So no one grows up, do they, to be an employer brand specialist? You kind of like fall into it. So it's a really interesting topic because it sits in different places in different companies. So it could sit in talent acquisition, it could sit in marketing, internal comms, or there could actually be an employer brand department in some larger companies. What is employer brand? So companies will have an employer brand, whether they choose to or not. So really, in simple terms, it's your reputation as an employer. So that starts from the very first interaction that you have when you see that first advert on social media. Then, you know, the journey that you'll then go on, you then might go onto their website and start poking around on their, you know, if they've got a careers website, what it's like to work there. You're looking for evidence, you know, will I belong? Will I fit in? And then once you start applying, then you're then going through that sort of process and that candidate journey. Once you're in the work and you've been offered the job, that whole experience, you know, the onboarding while you're working there, that is the whole employee experience. And that's where employer brand is so important. Your message and what you're telling your employees and what you're telling your candidates, all to help attract and retain the best talent. So in a nutshell, that really is what employer brand is.
Love it. Mic drop. I could just stop now. What a way to start. Brilliant. I love your terminology there, Sara. You've got one, whether you like it or not. Really, it's true, isn't it? It's so important that people recognize that you've got an employer brand. What vibe are you giving off to attract or detract your tribe, as the case may be, which I'm sure we'll go on to in a minute. It always stuns me when I'm consulting with our various social media clients on employer brand and the vibe they're giving off on social media. And often they're not even activating social media as a way to be a magnet to the top tier talent, which we will go into in a minute, but I'm just excited to tell people it's coming. Sara, what are the key areas of an employer brand? Can you share them so people know exactly what needs to be covered to be successful?
Yes, you start off with an employee value proposition. So that really is your company's mission statement, really, about what you offer your employees for working there and what they'll get in return for their services. So that really is your sort of like foundation, really. So once you've got your employee value proposition, and you get that through listening to your employees, what is it like to work here? And it's not about all the great stuff. It's really listening about, you know, the things that really need improving too, and being honest. So a good employee value proposition is telling you the situation where you are now, but also the future vision. And it's really, as I say, about attracting and retaining the right talent. So once you start with your mission statement and everyone's bought in, you generally then have values that then back those up. So they can range, a lot of the obvious ones, things like integrity and things like that. They're sort of ones that were from quite a few years ago. I think people have realized now that they're just a bit boring and everyone says those things. My favorite one is a food company. I think they do, I can't remember the name of it now, but their values are just basically don't be a dick.
Love it.
Which I love.
Yeah.
So we don't do as extreme ones like that, unfortunately, but it's really sort of bringing that essence really about what it's like to work there and the future of what your company will be. Once you've got that, then it's then talking about your employer brand. So like I said before, it's the first interaction that you have with that. So thinking about the whole candidate journey, so your social media posts, from advertising the role, are they consistent? Do they talk about the benefits about working there? But also, you want to attract the right people, but you also want to make sure that you're not attracting everyone. You've got to make sure that, in your job descriptions, as example, your job adverts, that you're not only saying what's great about working here, but also what's not so great and why it might not be right for you. So a really good analogy that we've heard is finding, the needles in the haystack. You don't want the whole haystack to apply. You just want the needles to apply, because otherwise that becomes an absolute nightmare for, the recruiters and things like that. So it's then making sure that message is then, and that experience is then sort of worked through into that whole journey, from when they're applying, from when the recruiters and the hiring managers are talking to them. You've got that consistent voice of, this is what it's like to work here, this is what you can expect. And we talk about authenticity a lot in employer branding, and it's about being honest and having those real stories, rather than sharing like a very sort of like glossy picture about what it's like to work somewhere. Somebody turns up on the first day and they feel like they've been completely catfished.
I love that. There's so much there, and that's why it's so important, people, if you're watching and listening, to tune in to listen to someone like Sarah on this, because there's so many areas that you need to think about. And I still just go back to your response at the start. You have an employer brand, whether you like it or not, and I think that those are some areas that people should definitely consider. Sarah, you've mentioned that word, and I was going to leave it for later on the show, but I'll throw it at you now instead. Authenticity. It's a recurring subject on this social media show where we talk about it regarding social media. Is there any risks that people should be aware of here with employer brand, right? Because would you agree that candidates, various people, they can see right through an inauthentic employer brand, right? So how can people actually avoid that when it comes to their social media? Because there's so many things that they're posting, and as you say, if it's then not the real deal when they turn up, that's going to be really bad news, right?
Yeah, do you know what, Chris? It's a really common problem. Authenticity is actually, we've got a podcast ourselves called Limitless, shameless plug, bite-sized podcasts, 15 minutes long. We've got over 70 episodes all around workplace culture and communications. And every single episode, I can guarantee that someone says the word authenticity or authentic. So, it is so important. Going back to your question of why it is important, and what the sort of like pitfalls of being inauthentic. If you think you've got things like Glassdoor, where people can rate you as an employer, and a lot of people now, when they're looking for jobs, will go and find evidence, of what it's like to work at your company. And it's now with social media, it's much easier to do that than it was years ago. Before, you would just open up the newspaper and look at the adverts there, apply, and it would just all be around word of mouth. Now employers can't hide, right? You've got, as I say, Glassdoor, where people are going to look at the pros and cons of working there, and you can usually get quite a good idea. Sometimes you have to take it with a pinch of salt. If you think you've got maybe quite sort of low level jobs where potentially people aren't potentially being paid particularly well, there's a high turnover of staff, then people are going to probably write a lot of negative things on there. So you have to sort of take that with a pinch of salt. Also, people are using on there's a lot of influence out there that working in different companies that are talking about their experience about working there, and people are going to listen to that and follow that. So if a company is saying, oh, it's amazing to work here, we do X, Y, and Z, I think people will be caught out very quickly with a little bit of research on social media. So that's why it's important to be honest and again, be authentic.
Love that. Yeah, I think there's so many things for people to grab onto there, Sarah. So thank you for sharing all of that. I think it kind of leads me nicely onto my next question regarding what people should actually do on social. What types of content can they do? Because if you don't tell your business story of what it's like to actually work at your organization, someone's going to tell it for you, a disgruntled employee on Glassdoor, for example, right? And I think there's nothing more authentic from my experience and with my advice that I've given before around, for example, day in the life content, where someone actually shows them, this is what it's like as I walk in, as I'm at my desk, where I eat my lunch, where I park my car, all of this stuff, right? So people can really feel what it is genuinely like. I love those videos where people are guiding you through the office and they're having chats with the MD and the accountant and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's really important. But that's enough about me and what I think works. Sarah, what do you think works on social media for A, retaining your A players, and B, becoming a magnet for those guys to join your organization too?
Yeah, do you know what? That's such a great question. And it actually goes back a little bit further, I would say, than that. So what's the right content? First of all, you need to understand who your audience is. So we're working at the moment with a couple of clients on doing talent personas. So who is it that they're looking to attract? So there's different ways that you can do that. So yesterday we ran a workshop where we took 4 different roles that they were looking to hire for. And we did some empathy mapping. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. So that's where you put yourself in the shoes of that employer or that candidate, and start saying, what are their motivations for looking for a role? What are the barriers? How are they feeling? What are they currently doing? What are the touch points during that journey? So you get to understand a little bit further, about who they are and what they're doing in their candidate, in their search for a role. You then go a stage further and then you interview people who are currently in that role. So it's just asking them, what is it that made you apply for this role? Why do you like it? Why do you love it? And what that does is just tries to get those real golden nuggets and those insights and those stories. And that's when you mentioned about stories, Chris. I'm glad you did, about telling the story of the employer and the company and what it's like to work there. But you want to do that in the shoes of the employee rather than the leadership team, because that's going to be a very different story. Okay, so when you say what's the best content, first of all, doing a persona mapping exercise like that. Then once you've got that, you can then start mapping out the candidate journey. And again, this is what we do with clients. You start off with the awareness stage. So where are they? On what channels? Are they on TikTok? Are they on LinkedIn? And you've got to remember that there's going to be about 30% of people that are in market for looking for a new role. And then there's going to be another 70% that are passive, that are not actually actively looking for a role at the moment. So as a company, how are you going to get in front of those people? So you sort of need to map out this whole sort of candidate journey. Where are those people? Once you've got the awareness and you've got their attention, so that's the first part. So what is it that's going to attract them? Is it their motivations? Is it the location of where they are? Is it career progression? Is it money? A lot of the time, is it benefits? What is it that's really going to attract that person? So it's getting that hook from an awareness point of view, and that's where paid advertising on social is great, because you're then widening your circle, but you're also targeting the right people. So then you've got initially, then you've got that hook. Okay. The next thing is they're going to be moving into the interest phase. And this is where they're going into that research phase, where they'll probably be going onto your social media channels. They're looking for evidence about what it's like to work there. Now, because you've done your persona mapping and you know the types of questions that they're going to have, you can then start answering those in your social media content from an organic point of view, but also you can on your careers website and your pages there, start answering some of those questions that those candidates are going to have. Really thinking about, that candidate journey, because the ultimate goal is you want them to apply, but you want them to be fully have that knowledge of, do you know what, I get a real sense of I know what it's like to work here. Because what you then don't want is someone to join and then go, actually, this is not what you've sold me. Then how expensive is that, right? To them, then lose that person, you've trained them up, they've gone because it's not what you've sold them in the beginning. So to answer your question, it's persona mapping, understand what their needs are, and then answering that through content. And that might be a day in the life. So there's now so much great content out there of people are doing, and employee generated content. And I could talk about this in a little bit, but that's a real sort of key trend. And it has been for the last year or so. Companies feel very nervous about employee generated content. But there's definitely some ways in which you can do it effectively with employee ambassadors and writing rules of things not to do rather than writing rules of things to do. So there's lots of great content that you can create on social to attract the right people.
Sarah, you've got me like a Winston Churchill. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
The fact that you've changed, you've given me the answer to the actual question I should have asked you around actually before that, personas, so important. I love the idea of, where are the candidates hanging out? Are they on TikTok, for example? I mean, we've consulted with a client in the financial sector recently, and we just transformed their TikTok to be completely dedicated to life right? And we just went through everything. And I also love, and I want to praise you for talking about the fact that it's not decided by the boardroom what they think people want to see. It's by them, by the audience. And that's why you should ask your new hires, where did you see us? Where you stalked us? Ask those questions and then reverse engineer it back from there. Brilliant. We're going to have to do a round two at some stage, Sarah. Genuinely, there's so much goodness in this. I want to ask you, actually, you've started to go into some tips and tricks there, which we'll go on to. But first, I want to ask you, what's hot right now for 2025 in terms of the things to do for attracting the best talent and also keeping your talent regarding social media?
Yeah, no, great question. So we ran an event at the end of last year. We have quite a lot of community things that we do within the employer brand space. So we've got our podcast. We also host employer brand meetups, generally in London. Our next one's going to be in March in London. So it's a breakfast meeting where we get specialists, invite them along to have a discussion, whether that's a panel discussion. The one that we did in last year, sort of October, November, was around the top trends for this year. So I feel like we've got quite a lot of knowledge and information, and I'm seeing a lot of these trends being spoken about through other sort of specialists and agencies as well. So first of all is that employee generated content. So video content is really key for employer brand campaigns. What we discussed was actually there's still a place for that really like high glossy type video where you're talking about the culture in a really professional way, lovely interviews with employees, and then you've got that sort of employee generated content where it's the authentic thing. And this is where we're talking about you can't hide anymore, you can't lie. So it's important to sort of still have that but keep it honest and real. But employee generated content is really big. There's a sort of bit in the middle, I would say, that's currently missing, that I think there's a real opportunity for companies to do, where it's just a bit more glossier content. So it's nicer to watch rather than seeing someone stumble around on their, on their mobile phone. So there's that sort of middle of the road content, which I think that's where companies really should be focusing perhaps their efforts when they're looking at creating content.
Sarah, just to interrupt you, just to interject just quickly there, just to go a little bit deeper, if you don't mind. When you say employee content, sorry, forgive me.
Yeah.
Anyone in the business, right? It could be the managing director, it could be someone in finance, it could be work experience, it could be uni grad, it could be someone that's been there for 18 years. Is that your definition of employee content?
Employee content, yeah. So if you think, let's say an early careers person, a grad, okay, they're looking at going working at X company. As I say, they're looking for evidence about what it's like. And if you think, when we go back to the persona mapping, what questions are they going to have? They're going to be saying things like, who's going to be my manager? What's my team going to be like? You talk about day in the life. What's my typical day to day? What fun things do they do? That they're the thing. Am I going to be mentored? How long will it be till I get promoted? So if you've got your employees relaying this content or giving their experiences, that's where the employee generated content is really, really going to help with your social media. And this is why I'm saying it's very expensive for companies to have that sort of high-end video production. And there is definitely a place for that. But there's definitely that middle road. So rather than someone doing it on their mobile phone, I think what we would like to see more of, and what a company should be doing more of to attract it, and this is what we're hearing from employees and candidates, is just nice content, but it's not completely polished. So I think that's definitely an opportunity and a trend that we'll be seeing in 2025. Yeah, the other really sort of like really important one, which is is DE&I, so diversity, equity and inclusion initiative. So we made big strides with like women in leadership and neurodiversity, but we're not quite there yet. And I think there needs to be a lot more sort of focus on LGBTQ+ disabilities and social economic as well. So that's another area where companies should be focusing on. And the key thing for employees is, and candidates, they'll be looking at the content and they'll be saying to themselves, do I belong? Do I belong there? So it's really important to share these stories of individuals that are within these groups, to sort of share that they are welcome and that just adjustments can be made. But one of the key points, and this is what we talked about at our event, and we talk about a lot in our podcast as well, and with clients, is making sure that you're not being tokenistic, so that you're making sure that your content, that you're including people in a normal, natural way, rather than being tokenistic. And I think that's really, really important for companies to focus on. So that's one key thing, is just being authentic again. Other trends, let me think. Engaging the next generation. Yes. I feel like I'm doing some real shameless plugging here, but I'll do it anyway. So we've got a webinar that we're launching in a couple of weeks on the 28th, where we're going to be talking about multi-generational workforce. So if you think you've got Gen Alpha that are going to be joining the workforce soon, they're so technically mind, it's completely natural to them, but you're going to have Gen Alpha and baby boomers in the same workforce at the same time, like 4 or 5 different generations. Is it 5 generations? I can't think. So it was Gen,
it might be, yeah,
Alpha, Gen X, you've got Gen Millennials, Gen Z and boomers. Yes, there's 5. So there's 5 generations, and it's about how you can attract and retain those talents, but them all working together and sort of playing on those strengths, but being understanding and empathetic as well. So I would say out of all of the trends that we were looking at, they're some of the real key ones which companies really should be focusing on.
I think that's a really great place to start with people, Sarah. There's so much that people can focus on there. I love the just really good business advice there of actually you should be future-proofing your organization by talking to future employees, even if they're not ripe yet, to use a banana analogy. It's really important to continue to talk to those people, so when they're ready to apply, they will apply because they feel like they can belong, which is a great word that you've used a lot in this podcast. And Sarah, I really want to, you might start ranting here, but I'm going to find it fun anyway. I really want to ask you, for your employer brand 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝘁, what are the things that you look at on LinkedIn, on social media, that make your skin crawl and you just want people to avoid?
Okay, this is a fun question. Firstly, okay, ChatGPT. Okay, we all, we've been using it. We've all been using it. It's so obvious now when people are just cutting and pasting and using it. All the words fostering, unleashing. There's a lot of it's just so obvious, and I just worry that you're then going to lose the human side of things. So when you see job adverts written and it's very clearly done through ChatGPT, just remove some of those words and make them your own. I think people are starting to sort of see through that now. So that, and don't get me wrong, it's a very, very useful tool, but used in the right way, right? So that would be my first one. Be more human when you're writing, particularly as you're attracting other humans into roles. You're not attracting robots. So be authentic. Oh, I can't believe I've used that word again, but be authentic and just be human when you're writing content to attract people. That's my first one. My second one, I would say, is stock photography.
Ooh, yeah.
And when you're trying to attract people, use people that work there. It doesn't cost a lot to go hire a photographer for the day and just get some really nice shots of your office, or if people are working from home, just get some photos of real people that work there. And it's so obvious, isn't it, when it's stock photography, when it just looks a bit naff. So that would be my other ick, I would say.
Love that.
There's my two key ones.
Two really strong ones. In response to your first one, I think a really easy way that people can become more authentic, even if they are trying to cut the corner with ChatGPT, etc. And I advise this with job ads or job posts in general, or recruiting type posts. If you're going to use words, well, why not have so for example, Sarah, for yourself, if you're recruiting for your agency, if you've got the job spec, the link, etc., why not have a video of you talking about the role at your desk? Oh, hey guys, I've just literally release this new role for our organization, and point up and do something engaging that's super authentic. So then it's not robotic, it's not static, there's no stock photography. So even if you are cutting the corner, just try to improve the authenticity by bringing a bit of human to it. Would you agree with that, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I might steal that one.
Well, if you agree with it. Sarah, there's so much more that we could have done today, but I know that you are very, very busy smashing it with all of your various things. Speaking of which, plug away. Where can people do business with you? What's coming up? I know that you guys obviously host a podcast, you've got webinars, etc. So plug away.
Okay, thank you. So contact me if you've got any questions or any projects or need any advice via LinkedIn, or you can head over to our website at 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗁.co.uk. We've got a number of different initiatives. So we've got our No Bullshit Guide to Employer Brand newsletter. We have our Leap Listens Bite Size podcast. We've got a couple of events. So we've got our face-to-face and our online EB meetup for anyone in employer branding, internal comms, marketing, interested in workplace culture. We're really trying to build a really great community of specialists. So just head over to our website and you can get hold of us there. But thank you. Thanks so much, Chris. I've enjoyed it.
Hey, my pleasure. And people don't know, which I will reveal now, is it's the first time that Sarah's been a guest on a podcast. So I feel very honoured. So thank you so much for your time today, Sarah.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. It's great. Thank you.
And thank you so much to everyone that's watching, whether you're watching live or watching or listening back. Let us know your thoughts and feelings on employer and employee brand. Really fascinated to know your thoughts. Drop us a comment down below. Ask questions. I'm sure that Sarah will respond to as many as she can. I've thrown her under the bus there anyway. As always, a massive thank you to all of our charity partners and, of course, our sponsors too. And I will see you this time next week for another episode of A Coffee with Chris.